All right, everyone, welcome back for another deep dive with me.
Yeah.
And today we're going to be talking all about
Water.
Water self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
So we were recording this in, early 2025, and it's no secret that
The
the
world?
world's kind of going through it a little bit with water right now.
Yeah.
We're facing a water crisis. Climate change is, really exacerbating the problem.
For sure.
And so, we're all looking for solutions. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about today is a system that can actually pull water from thin air.
Yeah.
Which sounds pretty wild.
Uh-huh.
And,
Sounds a little science fiction-y.
yeah, it does a little bit.
Yeah.
But we're going to dive into the details with our expert here today. And this is all based on this report we found called Water Self-Sufficiency.
Yeah.
Is it the key to thriving in a changing climate?
Yeah, that's a great report.
A really good report.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's worth just sort of starting out by kind of acknowledging that, even just basic everyday things that we do, like, watering our plants in our garden or, taking a shower.
Right.
It can feel very different when you really get a sense of the scale of this global water crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at the numbers, it's pretty startling. By the year 2050, global water demand is expected to go up by 55%.
Wow.
Which is a huge jump. And, right now there are already over 2 billion people who are living in areas that are experiencing water stress. And, one of the scariest predictions I've heard is that by 2030, climate change could actually displace as many as 700 million people because of water scarcity.
That's almost the entire population of Europe.
I know, it's incredible, right?
It's a wild number.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are definitely some
Sobering.
Yeah, sobering statistics.
Yeah.
So, it's clear we need to be thinking about solutions. We
Yeah.
need to be working on this problem.
For sure.
And, this idea of water self-sufficiency,
Mm-hmm.
it's more than just, taking shorter showers or being careful about how much water we use.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really like a paradigm shift in how we think about water.
Right.
Instead of just relying on these traditional systems that we have in place, which are often vulnerable to things like drought or, pollution, aging infrastructure.
Right.
We're talking about actually creating new sources of water, managing them in a really smart way.
Yeah.
And becoming less dependent on these large-scale, often vulnerable systems.
Yeah, it's about resilience.
Exactly.
And it's about, taking control of your own destiny when it comes to your water supply.
Exactly.
Which kind of brings us to this air fountain system.
Yes.
That we're going to be talking about today.
Okay.
This idea that you can actually extract water directly from the air.
Yeah.
Is that a viable solution?
It is. It sounds a little bit like magic.
It does.
But it's actually based on some really solid science. And it's really showing a lot of promise. So this air fountain system is a type of what's called atmospheric water generation technology,
Right.
which basically means that it acts like a really giant dehumidifier.
Okay.
It uses condensation to capture the moisture that's in the air. And what's really cool about it is it can work even in areas with varying humidity levels. So it doesn't have to be like a super humid climate.
Right.
It can still extract water from the air.
Okay.
And another thing that's really great about it is it uses very little energy.
That's huge.
Yeah. So it can be really beneficial for communities that don't have access to like a main power grid, off-grid communities.
Yeah.
So it can be a real game changer for those folks.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That could be a lifeline for communities that are really struggling with traditional water sources or don't have reliable access.
Absolutely. Yeah. There are already places in the world where they're using these types of systems successfully. There's a small village in Morocco that's been using a similar system to provide clean drinking water for their community.
Wow.
And, before they had that system, they were really struggling. They had to rely on unreliable wells, or they had to have water trucked in, which is really expensive.
Right.
And now they have a sustainable water source that they can manage themselves.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's really empowering.
Yeah. And I imagine, even in a place like California,
Yeah.
there are communities that are really struggling with drought and having to truck in water from, hundreds of miles away.
Yeah.
And this could be a way to
Totally. Right.
eliminate that dependence.
Exactly. And you think about all the costs associated with trekking water that distance.
Yeah.
The fuel costs, the carbon emissions.
Totally.
It's really significant. So this could really have a positive impact.
Yeah, absolutely. So besides accessibility, I mean, what are some of the other advantages to this system?
Well, I think one of the biggest ones is resilience.
Mm-hmm.
By creating your own water source, you're less vulnerable to things like drought.
Right.
Or disruptions in the supply chain.
Mm.
Imagine if you have a city that's completely reliant on one reservoir for their water, and that reservoir runs dry.
Right.
They're in big trouble.
They're in big trouble, yeah.
But if they have multiple sources of water, including something like an air fountain system,
right,
then they have a safety net.
Yeah.
It's like having a backup generator
totally
for your water supply.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then what about the environmental impact of this system?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's definitely something to consider. I mean, any technology is going to have some kind of environmental footprint.
Right.
But the air fountain system is actually designed to be pretty eco-friendly.
Okay.
First of all, it reduces the reliance on traditional water sources.
Right.
Which often require a lot of energy to pump and transport the water, which leads to more pollution.
Yeah.
So by reducing that reliance, we're actually reducing our overall environmental impact.
Okay.
And then it also lessens the strain on natural water sources like aquifers and rivers, which can be really beneficial for ecosystems.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it sounds like, kind of a win-win for both the community and the environment.
Yeah, sure.
So let's talk a little bit about the practicality. Like, how does this system actually work?
Okay.
What kind of setup is needed?
Yeah, so there are actually different types of atmospheric water generators.
Okay.
And they all have their pros and cons, but the air fountain system that we're talking about today uses a specific condensation process that's really efficient.
Okay.
So basically it pulls in air from the atmosphere.
Okay.
And it cools it down to the point where the moisture in the air condenses, and then they collect that water.
So it's like a really
fancy
dehumidifier.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it is like a super high-tech dehumidifier.
Okay.
It does require some technical expertise to install and maintain it.
Right.
But the technology is actually becoming increasingly user-friendly.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, we're talking about a really innovative solution here.
Yeah.
But realistically, what are some of the challenges?
Right.
Like, is this a perfect solution or are there drawbacks?
Yeah, of course. Like any innovation, there are some challenges that we have to consider. One of the biggest ones is the upfront cost.
Okay.
These systems can be pretty expensive to install, especially for individuals or smaller communities.
Right.
That can be a barrier.
Okay.
And then there's also technical complexity. You need people who have the knowledge and the skills to install and maintain these systems.
Right.
So that's something to consider. And then also, while it works really well in a lot of different climates, the effectiveness can vary depending on the humidity level.
Right.
So if you're in a really dry region, it might not be as productive.
Okay.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
But it definitely has a lot of potential.
Yeah, it's definitely a promising piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And I think this conversation has really highlighted, the importance of being creative and thinking outside the box when it comes to water.
Yeah.
So, what are some other strategies that people can explore if they're thinking about water self-sufficiency?
Yeah, there are so many great options out there. We've got some traditional methods like rainwater harvesting, which has been used for centuries and is super effective.
Yeah.
You can use rain barrels, cisterns. You can even just direct your downspouts into your garden.
Right.
And collect the water that way.
Yeah.
And then there's also gray water recycling, which is where you reuse water from your showers and your sinks and your laundry to water your plants.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of different options.
That's cool.
And, the idea is to really diversify your water sources.
Right.
And not rely on just one thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So if somebody's listening to this and they're thinking, okay, this is really interesting. I want to learn more. Like, what's a good first step?
Yeah. I would say the best first step is to just start researching. Look into what kind of water conservation and self-sufficiency options are available in your area.
Right.
Connect with local experts, attend workshops, see if there are any demonstration sites you can visit.
Right.
The more you learn, the better equipped you'll be to make informed decisions.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes it can feel overwhelming when you're first starting out, but even small steps can make a big difference.
Absolutely.
So, don't be afraid to just start somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a really fascinating conversation.
Yeah.
I feel like I've learned a lot about water self-sufficiency, and the air fountain system.
Yeah, it's a really cool technology.
It is really cool. I'm definitely inspired to kind of take a closer look at my own water usage.
Yeah.
And explore some of these solutions.
Awesome.
So yeah, I think the key takeaway here is that,
Yeah.
Water is a precious resource.
Absolutely.
And we all have a role to play in ensuring its sustainability.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. Whether you live in a big city or a small town, taking steps towards water self-sufficiency can really empower you and your community to thrive, even as the climate continues to change.
Yeah. And it's not just about, surviving. It's about thriving.
Right.
It's about creating a better future for ourselves.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of water self-sufficiency. We hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time.
Yeah. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.